Imagine walking into a village where the fires are still burning, the food is still warm, but not a single person is in sight. No tracks, no sounds, no signs of struggle, just an eerie, suffocating silence. In 1930, that's exactly what a group of hunters found in a remote Inuit settlement deep in the Canadian Arctic. This isn't folklore. This isn't a ghost story. It's in the official records of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and to this day, no one can explain it. Stay with me, because by the end of this story, you'll have heard every documented fact, every credible theory, and you might just form your own answer to one of the coldest unsolved mysteries in history. And before we begin, if you love exploring the corners of history that textbooks ignore, hit subscribe to infinity so you never miss another forgotten truth. It was late November 1930 when Joe LaBelle, a seasoned fur trapper, made his way along the icy shoreline of Anjikuni Lake, deep in Nunavut. LaBelle had visited this Inuit village before, a small but lively settlement of about 30 people. He expected to find warmth, laughter, and trading partners for the season's pelts. But when he arrived, something felt wrong. The usual sound of barking sled dogs was gone. There was no movement between the huts. The air was unnaturally still, and the only thing he could hear was the crunch of his boots on the snow. He stepped into the first igloo. Inside, a pot of stew still sat by the fire. The flames were low but alive, casting faint shadows on the walls. Wooden utensils were laid out, as if dinner had been interrupted only moments earlier. Moving from home to home, LaBelle found the same scene repeated. Food on the tables. Furs hung neatly along the walls. Oil lamps flickering. But there were no people, not men, not women, not children. Outside, the dogs were found tied up near the edge of the village. They were dead, starved and frozen, their bodies stiff in the snow. The sleds remained untouched. It was as though the villagers had simply walked away, leaving their lives behind in perfect order. LaBelle checked the snow for tracks. There were none. Days earlier there had been a fresh snowfall, yet he could find no trails leading away from the village. No footprints, no sled marks, nothing but the wind-carved drifts. He felt a cold weight settle in his chest. He had lived in the wilderness long enough to recognize danger, and this was the kind that whispered rather than roared. He left quickly, following the frozen river south until he reached the nearest telegraph station. There, he sent a message to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, urging them to investigate immediately. His words described an unthinkable disappearance, and signs of an entire people gone without trace. Within days, an RCMP unit made the grueling journey to Anjikuni Lake. What they found mirrored LaBelle's account in almost every detail, but the investigation would only deepen the mystery. This was not just a missing persons case. It was a puzzle with no starting point, no signs of violence, no signs of panic, no evidence at all of where 30 lives had gone. The lead investigator was Sergeant J. Nelson, a man known for his meticulous attention to detail. His first step was to document every hut, every artifact, every item left behind. He photographed the interiors, sketched the village layout, and took notes on the placement of personal belongings. In each dwelling, he found clothing, tools, and hunting gear in their usual places. If the villagers had fled, they had done so without taking even the most basic survival equipment, an unthinkable move in the Arctic winter. The dead sled dogs were a critical clue. Inuit culture depended on these animals for transportation and hunting. Abandoning them, especially while tied up, was unheard of. The RCMP noted the dogs appeared to have been left for at least a week before starving. Nelson searched the perimeter for any sign of intrusion. He found none. The snow revealed no human or animal tracks beyond the village boundaries. The absence of evidence was so absolute that it became its own kind of evidence, suggesting that whatever happened occurred before the last snowfall. At the village's communal food storage, supplies were untouched. Seal meat hung frozen in the air. Fish racks were still loaded. There was no sign of rationing, no sign the community had been preparing for a long journey. The RCMP began interviewing other trappers and travelers in the area. Some spoke of strange lights in the sky in the nights before the disappearance. Others claimed to have seen an unfamiliar man wandering the wilderness, tall, pale-skinned, and silent. Nelson included these accounts in his report, but he approached them cautiously. He focused instead on more tangible possibilities, a sudden migration due to environmental danger, or perhaps an outbreak of illness. But no bodies were ever found. No graves, no skeletal remains, no evidence that anyone had died nearby. It was as though the people of Anjikuni Lake had stepped out of their lives and into the air itself. By December, the investigation had reached a standstill. The RCMP closed the case, citing unknown causes, a rare and unsettling conclusion in their official records. Yet for decades, the file remained in archives, occasionally pulled by historians or journalists who hoped to find the missing pieces. None ever did. Over the years, theories about the Anjikuni disappearance multiplied. The most popular in the public imagination, though unsupported by evidence, was that the villagers were abducted by some unknown force. UFO enthusiasts seized on the reports of strange lights as proof. But among serious researchers, other explanations took root. One possibility was forced relocation. The Canadian government in the early 20th century sometimes pressured indigenous communities to move closer to trading posts or missions. But there was no record of such an order for Anjikuni Lake. Another theory focused on natural disaster. A sudden ice shift, perhaps triggered by seismic activity, could have endangered the village, forcing evacuation. But the landscape showed no signs of such an event. Some pointed to illness, an outbreak of disease leading to a desperate attempt to reach medical help. Yet leaving without supplies or transportation would have been suicidal in Arctic winter. Then there was the migration hypothesis, that the entire community moved to join another Inuit group. This had precedent in Arctic history, but it didn't explain why their possessions, food, and sled dogs were left behind. A few Inuit elders offered a more spiritual explanation. They spoke of Torngarsik, a powerful spirit who could lure people away from their homes. In this telling, the disappearance was not a crime, but a calling. Skeptics have also questioned the very existence of the mystery. Some argue the story may have been exaggerated by journalists in the 1930s, building on a kernel of truth. But the RCMP's own archival documents prevent it from being dismissed entirely. Modern investigators have used satellite imagery and aerial surveys to search for abandoned settlements that might match the villagers' relocation. So far, nothing has been found. Theories may abound, but every possible answer has one fatal flaw: it leaves behind more questions than it solves. And so, the story remains locked in the ice, untouchable and unsolved. Today, Anjikuni Lake is a lonely place. The settlement no longer exists. Only snow, wind, and the occasional hunter pass through. The site of the village is marked by nothing but memories and mystery. The story still circulates in Arctic communities, told by elders on long winter nights. Some speak of it as a cautionary tale, others as an unsolved wound in the history of their people. For historians, it is a case study in the limits of evidence. Even with official reports, photographs, and first-hand accounts, the truth can remain beyond reach. For locals, it is a reminder of the Arctic's power, how quickly it can erase human presence, how completely it can keep its secrets. In the end, the mystery of the village that vanished overnight is not just about what happened, but about the human need to know. It is about the way an unanswered question can haunt a place for nearly a century. Every winter, the lake freezes solid. The snow drifts form where the huts once stood. And if you stand there long enough, with only the wind in your ears, you can almost imagine hearing the faint echoes of voices carried across the ice. But they never come closer. They never answer. The silence of Anjikuni Lake is a silence that has outlived every person who once called it home. Perhaps one day, technology or chance will uncover the truth. Until then, the story stands as one of history's purest, coldest mysteries. And if you believe history still has secrets worth chasing, don't let this one fade away. Subscribe to Infinity, share this video with someone who loves a good mystery, and tell me in the comments, what do you think happened on that frozen November night?